This is called the Let Goer. And I spent a really, really long time in Texas just figuring out how high you have to have a maple seed to get it to always catch and spin when it falls. And I just wanted to bring 3 seconds of joy inside. I had this dream. I was working on a series of boat-like boxes for a show in at Pinland Gallery in North Carolina. And I had this dream while I was working on those boxes that I came into my studio and they were on the floor, and the floor was covered in wood shavings. And then in my dream, it was like one of those things where it was wood shavings, but it was also grass, and it was my studio, but it was like also a field. And the boxes suddenly stood up. And they were like deer, kind of, and they just sort of wandered off. And I realized I just had to make that happen. So that's where the herd came from. Yeah, and like they're a little bit boats still. The lenses are always kind of like thinking about the way it feels to walk around buildings and look in through windows, like knowing that there's an interior life or an interior space and an exterior is really interesting to me, the way that you catch glimpses through the slats and through those lenses. So they're not viewfinders specifically or intentionally. They don't line up in some specific way, but no matter which way you arrange them, they're always going to line up with something, and that sort of like serendipity is really interesting to me. And I like that they sort of feel like windows and also like eyes, that sort of like overlap of like a thing within and being outside of it and being able to sort of imagine what it's like to be inside it. So this is an older piece. I had I think like everybody, like in my studio, I had these really beautiful objects that people had sent me. And the objects are from like everyday things. You know, this is like locks on a ski boots, and this is an old-fashioned way to like click a camera shutter from a distance. But I didn't have any relationship to these objects. People sent them to me, or I found them, and they were inspiring, but they never became part of a piece, and they sort of developed their own like sacredness. So I just ended up making a library for them. And the drawer, when you open it, it activates one of these sort of billboards. And so the billboards all have drawings on them that reference what's in the drawer. So that when you look in the drawer, hopefully you remember what you've seen. And then you go around and you can see what the drawing is. It's like a sketchbook of ideas almost. And I like the idea that this is like a piece that, like, it's a piece of furniture that sort of like forces two people or allows two people to work with each other. There's something really beautiful to me about that. I like the idea that that there's room for furniture to become a lot more than, we stopped at tables and chairs, and I just am like, but now what do we need furniture for? Maybe these things, maybe not. is like a twin to the Let Goer. This one's called the Blower. And I just wanted a propeller held at my mouth height so that I can do that. And the belly of this thing has a maple seed in it, from the same tree, as sort of a nod to the fact that propeller technology, like that's the man-made version of this. You know, like we saw the natural world do this, and then we invented helicopters. You know, so I think there's something sort of lovely about reminding people of those connections. This I did for a themed show. It was called Light of the Moon, and I had just moved to Indianapolis, so this was many years ago. This was 2013 or 14, and I'd moved from Kentucky where I could see the night sky. I could see the Milky Way every night, and the only sort of connection I had to the night sky in Indy, because it's such a big city, is the moon. And so I made this over the course of 2 weeks, and I call it a half month's worth. Each of the drawers gets bigger, and then the flag that it opens is the changing moon. So it goes from quarter to half to gibbous to full. And this one, it doesn't hold anything, but I sort of think of it as holding time, holding that two weeks worth of time. So do this properly. This one, like the expansion contraction because of the, yeah. So that's locked. And this one contains seeds too. And I was thinking about climate change. Like this is sort of like thinking about rising water a little bit, like that kind of like high water line. And I wanted to make a place that sort of like contained these maple seeds and held them safe and guarded them. And so this thing became this kind of animal that feels a little bit protective. So when I click that down, it releases this. That opens and unlocks this drawer so it'll come out. It doesn't come out, otherwise it's locked. And those like sort of things that open are eyes. So now you're being watched as you're sort of like pulling this out. And then this box has another eye, so you're still being watched. Take care of the objects inside. And those are the seeds. Very practical. Everyone should have one. And then that locks it back in place. And that's the sound of one eye clapping. 6 eyes clapping.
I've seen, yeah.
Yeah, telescoping drawer. And this one's, somebody last night at the opening was like, but what does it do? And I was like, it just slides back and forth. It's just a drawer. And she was like, oh. And I was like, okay, well, I'll make a flag on it somewhere that opens. But I've always loved, did you read Dr. Dolittle when you were a kid? Sort of like terrible, racist, problematic writing. But there was a character, an animal in that called the Push Me Pull You, which was a two-headed, some kind of ram or something. And I've always been fascinated and loved the idea of something that was just two-headed. And so this is called a Push Me Pull You. Telescoping drawer. And it's sort of like a love letter to nautical devices, telescopes, and also that sort of push me pull you animal. And it's just really, really fun to make cylinders in wood. And it was fun to make the leg structure and make it all sort of collapsible. So this thing is a collection of things that I've found on nightly walks. And I've had this sort of idea for years of making a library or a space to sort of like hold these kind of weird things that I collect and think of as precious or important or special, and that feel like they connect me to a city and to the other people moving in cities. And I wanted to do something that sort of talked about that, not just the objects, but the connections that I feel to the places and to the people who are moving through those places with me. So these things are sort of laid out to feel a little bit like a city. And when you open and close the drawers, it opens and closes these sort of sail forms. And it sort of opens these like weird eyes and is just like a reminder to like pay attention, to be where you are, and to notice. These got all blown around. Please don't touch the art. So, I mean, some of it's like natural stuff, some of it is just things that people have lost. You know, and they really describe cities. Like, this is all Madison, Wisconsin, and it's like a college town, so like students lose the funniest things. Whereas like Philadelphia, I'm trying to find a Philly drawer. That's a Philly drawer, that's a Philly drawer, not a Philly drawer, that's Madison. That's a Philly drawer, of course. Milwaukee. That's a Madison drawer. Oh my God. That's a Madison drawer for sure. Like the students losing all their weird rings and bracelets.